So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We have a really fascinating and honestly a slightly surreal mission for you today.
Oh, surreal is definitely the right word for it. It's really out there.
Yeah, it really is. We are unpacking this highly specific, deeply biting piece of like near future political satire. And I mean, the title alone is just, it's a masterclass in setting the tone.
Right. It completely throws you off balance before you even read the first sentence.
Exactly. So the title is Hezbollah fighters trade heart attacks for pager attacks in bold lifestyle upgrade.
Which is just, it's wild. You're handed this incredibly tense geopolitical flashpoint.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
wrapped in the casual, breezy language of, like, a weekend wellness retreat.
It's so jarring. So for some context for you listening, we're analyzing a post from a blog called Barack Face, and this post is dated May 6, 2026.
Which is interesting in itself, setting it just slightly in the future.
Right. And the author, who goes by Paramendra, actually notes at the top of the site that he was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Which gives you a tiny bit of background on his political engagement, I guess.
Yeah, but what makes this deep dive truly expansive is that we aren't just looking at one isolated article. We have access to the entire surrounding digital ecosystem of this blog.
And it is massive. I mean, it's a huge archive.
It really is. It runs continuously all the way back to 2004. Plus, there's this completely dizzying bibliography of books written by the author. So we're basically looking at this dark comedy sketch that's embedded within a massive digital universe dedicated to, like, artificial intelligence, global trade, and utopian philosophy.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
But before we really delve into the mechanics of that dark comedy, we do need to establish a very clear analytical framework for this conversation for you.
Right, definitely. That's super important.
Because the satirical text directly references the real-world, highly fraught conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. And our objective today is strictly literary and structural analysis.
Exactly. We're just looking at the text.
Right. We are examining how the author constructs their satire, the thematic juxtapositions they use, and how this specific piece fits into the broader context of their other published works. So we are observing this text entirely impartially.
Yeah, we aren't taking any political sides here.
Not at all. We aren't endorsing the geopolitical viewpoints of the author, nor are we validating the fictionalized portrayals of any groups or state actors within the narrative. We're simply here to look at how the machinery of the text actually works.
Well said. And I mean, the hook for me, the central tension that makes this source material so compelling, is the jarring contrast in the author's output.
It's a huge disconnect, right?
It's massive. You have this writer who is dedicating thousands of pages to utopian AI, the age of abundance, and these grand blueprints for global peace.
Right. Really high-level, optimistic stuff.
Yeah. But then they sit down and draft this hyper-localized slapstick humor about militant operatives being physically dismantled by, like, 1987 consumer electronics.
It's a really wild pivot.
So our job today is to figure out how those two completely different worldviews actually coexist in the same source material.
And I think we can start solving that puzzle by looking at the core premise of the article itself. The author basically takes a coordinated explosive attack on a communications supply chain, and they completely reframe the narrative vocabulary.
Right. They totally changed the words we use to describe it.
Exactly. They don't analyze it as a military strike or an intelligence operation or even sabotage. They literally categorize it as a sudden shift in public health and lifestyle choices.
Which is just so dark. The text introduces us to this guy, Dr. Ahmed Al-Fakam, who is presented as a cardiologist.
A very stressed cardiologist, apparently.
Yeah, and he says he is currently treating, quote, 47 patients with singed thighs and existential confusion.
That phrase, existential confusion, does so much heavy lifting in this piece.
It really does, because he's a heart doctor dealing with explosions.
Right, and the doctor elaborates on it, saying, people have heart attacks, Hezbollah has pager attacks, it's much more efficient. And then he defines these explosions as a revolutionary new cardiac event that skips the middleman of clogged arteries and goes straight for the explosives.
I was actually trying to pinpoint why this framing felt so oddly recognizable to me when I was reading it.
Oh, really? What did it remind you of?
Well, it mirrors the exact tone of, like, a trendy men's health magazine.
Oh, I see that, yeah.
It reads exactly like an article advising you to swap out processed sugars for a high-intensity interval workout. Except here, the text says the fighters are abandoning years of shawarma abuse and yelling at the TV.
Right, for something much faster.
Yeah, for immediate 72 virgin eligibility. It's They take the mundane, optimization-obsessed language of modern wellness culture and they map it directly onto sudden, violent death.
Which is such a bizarre juxtaposition.
So what is the actual mechanism at play here? Like, why does applying a clinical, medical lens to a military casualty make the satire work so well?
Well, the mechanism is basically category error, and it's deployed as a weapon to strip away ideological armor.
Oh, that makes sense, because you expect a certain kind of language.
Exactly. When you read an analysis of asymmetrical warfare, your brain is conditioned to process really heavy, severe terminology. We expect words like insurgency or collateral damage or, operational security.
Right, the serious words.
Yeah, and those words inherently carry a certain political gravity. They legitimize the participants as serious actors on a historic stage. So by completely denying the reader that vocabulary, the author denies the militant organization its desired aura of gravitas.
Wow. So they are basically forced into a box they don't belong in.
Precisely. By diagnosing an explosive device in your pocket as a preventative cardiology issue, the author shrinks the entire geopolitical conflict down to the level of personal health mismanagement.
That's brilliant, honestly. So they aren't framed as casualties of a sophisticated intelligence apparatus.
Nope. They are framed as victims of their own poor lifestyle choices. It completely flattens the ideological stakes of the conflict into this weird, bureaucratic, medicalized absurdity.
And, that reduction of stakes is even more apparent when the text moves from that big picture medical perspective down to the individual human toll.
The interviews with the actual fighters.
Yeah, we get this firsthand account from a fighter lying in a hospital bed, and the physical description is just completely devoid of any traditional battlefield dignity.
It's very grim, but in a slapstick way.
The text literally notes his left hand enjoyed its own zip code.
Which is such a brutally funny way to describe a horrific injury. The author is hyper-focused on this concept of the undignified casualty.
Right, because usually war stories are about heroism.
Exactly. Military propaganda, regardless of the ideology behind it, relies heavily on a specific aesthetic of sacrifice. There is this script of martyrdom that requires solemnity and resolve and a real sense of legacy.
But this fighter realizes his script has basically been stolen from him.
Yeah, he feels totally robbed.
He complains so bitterly in the text. He says, "I was this close to a classic stress-induced myocardial infarction like my father before me."
It's like he feels cheated out of his inheritance.
He really does. He goes on to say he ate like a king and smoked like a chimney. He genuinely feels he put in decades of hard work to earn a respectable, traditional death by cardiovascular disease.
Right, and instead he gets ambushed by a beeper.
Yeah. What does that say about the way we view conflict now?
Well, that complaint highlights a profound shift in the sociology of modern conflict. The father's hypothetical heart attack represents this lifelong, slow-burning devotion to a really stressful cause. It implies a lifetime of leadership and struggle.
A sort of grim respectability.
Exactly. The son, however, is taken out instantaneously by hijacked, obsolete technology. It feels entirely unearned to him. It's an intervention by a trickster, not an honorable death on a battlefield.
And the ultimate humiliation for this fighter lands in this one line. He says, "Do you know how undignified that is? My martyrdom video now has sound effects."
That is the crux of the author's critique of militant propaganda right there.
Because it ruins the aesthetic.
Exactly. Propaganda requires the audience to take the subject as seriously as the subject takes themselves. And this fighter is deeply concerned with the production value of his own demise. He has a literal brand to maintain.
And you can't be a terrifying martyr if you're the butt of a joke.
No, you can't. It's
No.
like, imagine watching a tense, gritty mob movie climax.
Okay.
And right before the pivotal shootout, the boss's phone rings with this loud, obnoxious spam call. The tension evaporates instantly. You simply can't be terrified of someone who is participating in a physical comedy routine.
The spell is broken. The introduction of the pager's sound effects just fundamentally disrupts the auditory and visual aesthetic of terror.
It absolutely does. The author uses this detail to argue that the ultimate betrayal for these fighters isn't even the physical injury, it's the destruction of their brand.
Right.
Their reliance on supposed secure 1987 technology didn't merely compromise their operational security, it made them look inherently ridiculous to the outside world.
And when that individual narrative of the fierce warrior collapses into physical comedy like that, the whole organizational structure usually panics, right?
Oh, completely. It's a domino effect.
And the text tracks that institutional panic perfectly. The Hezbollah leadership attempts to issue new health guidelines to manage the crisis, and the spokesman actually delivers the update via carrier pigeon.
A carrier pigeon. It signals this immediate, panicked technological regression. The organization suddenly realizes their supply chain is actively hostile, so they revert to medieval communication.
It's so funny. And the spokesman issues this hilariously regressive directive. He says, brothers, avoid stress, avoid Israel, and for the love of God, do not open any package that says, from your friends at Taiwan.
The Taiwan rule.
Yes, he formally codifies the Taiwan rule, advising his fighters to maybe consider loving life just a little bit for medical reasons.
There is so much packed into that one joke. The author is layering a really sharp geopolitical observation under the humor. We have the obvious nod to Taiwan as a central node in global electronics manufacturing.
Right, the chips.
Yeah, but the real turn is the ideological pivot. The leadership is suddenly forcing a love-of-life doctrine onto their members.
Which is the exact opposite of what they usually preach.
Right, and they aren't doing it because they experienced a genuine philosophical awakening. It's purely as a pragmatic defense mechanism against their own electronics. The ideology literally becomes subservient to the supply chain.
That's a great way to put it. The ideology has to bow to the hardware. And that institutional panic filters down into something even more pathetic at the ground level.
The support group.
Yes. The text describes this newly formed 12-step support group called Pagers Anonymous, and their slogan is, one beep at a time.
I think analyzing the trope of a 12-step program here is really vital for you to understand the satire, because a 12-step program fundamentally requires the admission of powerlessness.
You have to admit you have no control.
Exactly. It is a framework for individuals who have lost control over their own environment or their impulses. By forcing hardened operatives into the structure of Pagers Anonymous, the author completely strips away their agency.
They're no longer soldiers.
Right. They're no longer combatants making tactical maneuvers. They're just victims trying to process a hostile reality that they fundamentally don't understand.
And the quotes from the group members are just incredible. You have this guy, Khalid, who explains that his pager activated during prayer. And he admits, I thought it was the rapture. It was just lithium polymer.
That line is just, it's the collapse of grand religious eschatology into cheap consumer chemistry.
Yes.
He is psychologically primed for divine intervention, the literal end of days. And instead, he is confronted with a faulty battery. The profound disappointment in his realization, it was just lithium polymer, is this brilliant distillation of how mundane technology can puncture absolute fanaticism.
It just pops to the balloon. And then another member complains, I used to worry about high blood pressure. Now I worry about low pager pressure.
Which perfectly domesticates the terror.
It totally does. The fighters end up sounding like frustrated consumers stuck on hold with a telecommunications company.
Like they're trying to get a refund from Best Buy.
Exactly. And it all culminates with a fighter admitting, my wife left me after the incident. She said she married a warrior, not a man who gets fragged by customer service.
Oh, man. Fragged by customer service is the linguistic anchor of the entire piece. It really is.
It's such a specific phrase.
Because it takes this visceral, violent term fragging, which is associated with internal military betrayal, right?
Yeah, troops turning on their own commanders.
Right. And it forcefully wells it to the most soul-crushing bureaucratic experience of modern civilian life, which is dealing with customer service.
And the implication of that is just devastating for them, because the wives aren't abandoning the cause because the ideology is flawed.
No, not at all.
They are leaving because their husbands have become deeply embarrassing. They are literally just losers in the electronics marketplace.
It really reframes the whole macho warrior ethos.
Yeah.
And, the satire also trains its lens on the opposing side, capturing a very different kind of absurdity.
The Israeli response?
Yeah. The fictionalized Israeli officials in the text don't respond with military grandstanding. They don't give a big speech. Instead, they offer a, quote, polite shrug and a coupon for 20% off future communication devices.
Which is just so insulting. It's framing a state intelligence apparatus as a smug tech retailer.
Exactly. It highlights a cold corporate sociopathy. The text removes the heat of a holy war and replaces it with the chilling detachment of a product recall.
A lethal product recall.
Right. And this is reinforced by the anonymous source who warns, we told them modern cell phones were dangerous. They chose poorly. Next up, walkie-talkies with thermite.
It's phrased like a tech roadmap. Next quarter, we're rolling out thermite. The casual product launch timeline applied to asymmetrical escalation is actually pretty terrifying.
It really is. And that corporate coldness eventually scales up to a global level in the article. The World Health Organization actually enters the narrative,
Right. They upgrade the situation to a regional epidemic.
which brings the initial metaphor of the lifestyle upgrade full circle. It is officially codified as a public health crisis by international institutions.
And the author's list of symptoms for this new epidemic is it's an excellent piece of psychological observation, but disguised as a joke.
The symptoms are highly specific. Let's go through them.
Yeah. First, you have phantom beeping, even after the device is gone.
And we are all familiar with phantom vibration syndrome, right?
Oh, yeah. Thinking your phone buzzed in your pocket when it didn't.
Exactly. That modern neurological glitch where you feel your smartphone buzz even when it's on the table. The author takes that completely mundane modern annoyance and elevates it to acute PTSD.
Because for these guys, a beep means something way worse than an email.
Right. For these fighters, a phantom beep isn't a missed text message. It is the physical anticipation of imminent dismemberment.
Wow. And then the second symptom is the, quote, uncontrollable urge to yell Allahu Akbar right before your crotch explodes.
The author basically transforms a conditioned, performative battle cry into an involuntary neurological reflex, like a sneeze.
That is wild. And the final symptom is a sudden, intense interest in landlines from 1974.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate strategic outcome for Hezbollah in the text. The pinnacle of their operational retreat is the total, absolute banning of all electronic devices.
Right. They literally have to retreat to a cave 400 meters underground, and they are relying on a single, highly trusted rotary phone.
A rotary phone in a cave.
Yes. And to ensure maximum security, the text says the phone is guarded by 3 guys named Mohammed who are definitely not scared of rotary dial.
Which is such a funny image.
And the commander is already terrified of the next technological compromise. He's muttering, next time we'll just use smoke signals. Unless those Jews start weaponizing clouds.
Let's actually look at the underlying mechanics here, because it's important. The joke about weaponizing clouds is funny on its surface, sure. But within the logic of this universe, it points to a complete psychological fracture.
Like, they don't trust nature anymore.
Exactly. What is this text fundamentally arguing about the nature of technology in modern asymmetrical warfare?
I mean, it seems like it's saying technology isn't actually helping them.
Right. The text is dismantling a very popular narrative about modern conflict. For decades, the prevailing theory was that cheap, ubiquitous, off-the-shelf technology empowered the underdog.
Like anyone with a smartphone could start a revolution.
Exactly. The idea was that insurgencies or decentralized groups could use mobile phones and encrypted apps to outmaneuver massive, sluggish state militaries.
The democratization of communication was supposed to level the playing field for the little guy.
But this text argues the exact opposite. It posits that the supply chain is the battlefield.
Wait, expand on that a bit.
Well, if you rely on consumer electronics to execute a war, but you do not control the manufacturing layer, or the shipping logistics, or the silicon fabrication, your operational security is entirely an illusion.
Oh, wow. Because someone else built the tools.
Right. The very tools meant to give you agility become inescapable traps. You are essentially renting your military infrastructure from actors who can turn it against you at any moment.
That is a terrifying thought. You don't own your own weapons.
Exactly. And that forces a highly organized group to regress back into the Stone Age. When a fighter fears that the clouds themselves might be weaponized, they have suffered a total loss of trust in the physical world.
It's pure paranoia.
Right. They haven't just been defeated tactically, they have been defeated epistemologically. They can no longer verify what is a benign object and what is a lethal threat. A pager is a bomb. A cloud is a bomb. Nothing is safe.
Everything is compromised. And, to truly understand this profound skepticism of technology, we have to kind of pull back the lens and look at who actually wrote this piece.
Right. The author, Paramendra.
Because if you just read this article in a vacuum, you might assume it was penned by a massive cynic, someone who believes technology is inherently evil and dangerous.
Right, a total Luddite.
Exactly. But a quick glance at the sidebar of the Brockface blog reveals a completely different reality. It's actually kind of shocking.
The bibliography authored by Paramendra is really extensive, and it completely complicates our understanding of the satire we just read.
We really have to categorize this bibliography for you to grasp the scale of this author's worldview. Let's look at the first massive category, which is artificial intelligence in the future.
Okay.
We see titles like Lumina AI, The Trillion-Dollar Sun, and we have presogenetics, the technology that lets us watch life think. How photons, cells, and AI may help us cure cancer and rewrite medicine.
Very optimistic, grand titles.
Yeah, and then there's this highly specific forecast titled Agentic AI, set to explode in 2026.
The concept of agentic AI, which is artificial intelligence that can actually pursue complex goals and take independent action, is crucial here, especially given the 2026 timestamp of the blog post.
Right, because that's right around the corner for the author.
Exactly. But the author's focus isn't strictly limited to software and biology. The second major category in this huge bibliography is global trade and macroeconomics.
Yeah, we see books like Physical AWS, How the Logistics Cloud Will Reshape Global Commerce and Ignite the Age of Abundance.
The phrase logistics cloud is key. It proves that the author intimately understands supply chains. They see global shipping and physical distribution as an interconnected network, just like server farms.
Like physical data moving around the world.
Exactly. We also see titles like Rethinking Trade, a blueprint for a just and thriving global economy, and The $500 billion Pivot, how the India-US alliance can reshape global trade.
The author is designing these massive systemic blueprints for how money and goods move across the planet. It's huge picture stuff. And then we hit the third category, which shifts into deep spirituality and utopianism.
Right, this is where it gets really eclectic.
Yeah. Books titled Kalkism, The Economic and Spiritual Blueprint for an Age of Abundance, or The Last Age of War, The First Age of Peace. Lord Kalki, Prophecies and the Path to Global Redemption. And prophecies are proof of God.
It is a dense, highly eclectic, and heavily interconnected intellectual footprint. The author is tackling everything all at once.
But I have to challenge this framing, though. Let's look at the inherent contradiction here for a second.
Okay, what's the contradiction?
Well, if this author genuinely believes in Kalkism, this spiritual, AI-driven age of abundance where technology elevates humanity and literally cures cancer, how do you reconcile that with writing a highly cynical, localized piece where a logistics cloud is used to physically blow up people's legs?
It's a fair question.
Right. Isn't the dark, trickster energy of the pager satire entirely contradictory to the core thesis of a techno-utopian philosopher?
It definitely appears contradictory at first glance, but I think it starts to make sense when you identify the variable that the author is truly obsessed with.
Which is what?
The catalyst.
The catalyst.
Yes. The common thread running through all of this, from curing cancer and presogenetics all the way to the exploding pagers, is the mechanism of technological disruption.
Oh, I see.
The author isn't just the utopian, they are a systemic observer. They're constantly watching how systems break.
So they're interested in the moment of change.
Exactly. In the author's utopian books, the catalyst like AI, or this logistics cloud, is applied to break down stagnant systems of disease or poverty. It shatters the status quo to build the age of abundance.
Okay, so that's the positive application.
Right. The satire, however, explores what happens when that exact same mechanism of sudden technological disruption is applied to a geopolitical conflict. The pager attack shatters a decades-long military stalemate in a single afternoon.
Wow. Yeah, it completely flips the board.
Exactly. So whether the technology is designed to cure cancer or sever a limb, the author is deeply fascinated by the pivot point. That exact moment, a new piece of silicon forces reality to rewrite its own rules.
That makes a ton of sense. The sudden violent shift caused by a compromised supply chain is just like the dark mirror of the sudden miraculous shift caused by an AI breakthrough.
They are two sides of the exact same coin. Disruption.
And that relentless obsession with capturing the pivot point is physically manifested in the actual structure of the blog itself. It basically serves as a digital time capsule.
The metadata of the blog archive is just staggering to look at.
It really is. The archive data provided shows this blog running continuously from October 2004 all the way to May 2026.
Over 20 years of continuous posting.
Yeah, and it has accumulated over 4.9 million page views. But the posting frequency is what truly indicates the author's mindset. In the year 2025 alone, the author published 1,333 posts.
That is an incredible volume of content.
In July 2025, there were 238 posts. In 1 month.
We are looking at an author who is attempting to process the real-time data flow of the entire planet. It's almost compulsive.
And you can see exactly what data they are prioritizing by looking at the specific news links highlighted in the sidebar of the site.
Right, the information diet.
Yeah, they link to an article on how Mexico City is sinking. Then there's an opinion piece by Neil deGrasse Tyson demanding, give us the aliens.
Aliens in sinking cities.
Right. And then a cultural piece about the backlash to Billie Eilish's vegan comments. And economic analysis on how American factories lag in adopting AI.
It's all over the map.
And alongside these links, the blog is categorized with these sweeping geopolitical labels like Iran, Marco Rubio, Bengal, and Israel.
This layout perfectly mirrors a concept from another one of the author's books, actually. The one titled The Convergence Age, 10 Forces Reshaping Humanity's Future.
Oh, convergence.
Yes. The sidebar of the blog is a literal visual representation of convergence. Everything happening everywhere, all at once in one feed.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to think about your own daily interaction with the internet. Think about the friction of opening a news aggregator on your phone.
It's exhausting, usually.
It is, and this blog perfectly encapsulates that modern cognitive condition. You are simultaneously confronted with profound civilization-threatening catastrophes like sinking metropolises, alongside these utopian dreams of artificial intelligence.
And sprinkled with pop culture.
Exactly, interspersed with completely trivial celebrity gossip about Billie Eilish and tense updates on global military standoffs. And sitting right in the center of that chaotic feed is a piece of explosive political slapstick satire.
It's a lot to take in.
The blog literally flattens all of human experience, tragedy, hope, economics, and absurdity into a single, overwhelming scrolling feed.
I think the author is meticulously documenting the overwhelming noise of the present transition. The 4.9 million page views over 2 decades represent a relentless attempt to map humanity's journey from, Web 1.0 all the way to the hypothetical explosion of agentic AI.
So the satire isn't really out of place at all.
No, the satire about the Hezbollah pagers isn't an anomaly in this landscape. It is simply one highly specific, violently disruptive data point in a 20-year project of watching human systems break down and rebuild themselves.
Wow. We have really covered a massive amount of ground today.
We certainly have.
We started by dissecting a satirical medical crisis, analyzing how the clinical language of preventative cardiology was basically weaponized to strip the dignity from a geopolitical conflict.
And we observed the profound organizational panic that ensues when a supply chain becomes actively hostile.
Right, driving combatants into a literal 12-step program where they lament being defeated not by rival soldiers, but by customer service, which is still such a funny concept.
It's brilliant.
And then we zoomed out to place this hyper-specific dark comedy into the sprawling, utopian, structurally obsessed mind of its author, a writer who is out here cataloging sinking cities and AI miracles while envisioning this grand age of abundance.
Which brings us to a really critical final thought for our listeners today.
Yes, based on all these interconnected themes, what should we really be taking away from this text?
Well, the author writes obsessively about building an age of abundance through absolute connectivity, right? Through the logistics cloud, agentic AI, and human-tech symbiosis.
Tying everything together.
Exactly. They envision a future where our biology and our technology are intimately linked to cure disease and optimize global trade. Yet, in their own satire, when the true test of survival actually arrives.
The ultimate defense against compromised technology is 3 men sitting in a subterranean cave, fiercely guarding an obsolete rotary phone.
Total disconnection is the only real form of safety.
It demands that we ask a pretty difficult question about our own trajectory.
As we embed technology deeper and deeper into our supply chains, our infrastructure, and our literal pockets, are we actually constructing the foundation of our own enlightenment?
Or are we simply creating incredibly sophisticated, inescapable mechanisms that will eventually force us all back into the dark?
It's a sobering thought, because the more connected we are, the more vulnerable the hardware becomes.
It's definitely something for you to consider the next time you feel a phantom vibration or your phone beeps unexpectedly in a quiet room. You really have to wonder what kind of supply chain you're actually carrying around in your pocket.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you on the next one.